Good morning, entrepreneurship kids. It's Mr. Fritsch. Welcome back. I hope you're all doing really well and that your family members are all safe and healthy. And I'm sure you've gotten a lot of documents emailed to you explaining what the rest of the semester is going to look like. So as you know, we're going to be posting lessons for you on a weekly basis now. All right. Each week's going to look a little different for entrepreneurship. But I just want you to know that at any time during 8:30 to 1:30, 5 days a week, you can get in touch with me through email. I will be monitoring email from 8:30 until 1:30 all week long. All right? All right. Certainly I'll be there during the period time slot for period 1. All right? All right. For the first lesson, the business cycle. We did cover this the very first week we were out, but less than half, only about 1/4 of you did anything with the note packet. So I want to cover it again because it's important for you to understand the business cycle and how entrepreneurs can take advantage of it. So I'm going to go over that lesson plan again. So for the first lesson plan, the business cycle, you're going to need the note packet either as a Word document or as a PDF file, as you can see is under upcoming events. So you can either open up it as a Word doc and then just fill in the answers, or save it into a Google Doc, or you can print it off as a PDF and write in the answers. All right. But then you're also going to have to open up the business cycle lesson 1 worksheet and submit that to me. All right. Without wasting any more time, let's get into the notes. So business cycle lesson 1 notes. All right. All right. We've talked about this before in class. I know most of you already know this, but a business cycle is just a cycle of the economy doing well, then falling off and not doing as well, and then coming back and doing well once again. And of course, the good times always last longer than the bad times, except for the one time we had a really bad time in the Depression during the 1930s. But for the most part, expansions and good times last longer than recessions and bad times. All right? All right, first, the U.S. gross, well, let's backstep for just a second. The way that economies are measured and how well we're doing is by gross domestic product. That measures all the goods and services that a country produces. So I want you to realize that the U.S. gross domestic product is $21.4 trillion. That was for 2019. In the worksheet that you're going to have, you're going to go in and you're going to look at the top countries in the way of gross domestic product, GDP, and you're going to see that the United States is way ahead of all other countries. All right, scrolling down a little bit in the note packet. All right. A recession typically means a downturn in economic activity, as we just talked about. Most economists use a specific definition of 2 consecutive quarters of declining real GDP for a recession to be counted as a recession. All right. There is no formal definition of a depression. However, recessions have averaged about 10 months in length since the 1950s, and the depression back in the 30s lasted for almost an entire decade. All right, so the movement of an economy through a business cycle also highlights certain economic relationships. While growth will rise and fall with cycles, there's a long-term trend line for growth. That means that for the most part, our economies keep growing and growing and growing year after year after year. There's an uptrend. All right, and then finally, when the economy heads into a tailspin, you may hear news reports of dropping housing starts or increased jobless claims, meaning more people are unemployed now, and shrinking economic output. All right, and then we have to think about how that affects us as entrepreneurs. Scrolling down to page 2, the actual business cycle and the 4 different stages. All right, so not that we always start in a peak, but there's 4 stages of a business cycle. The first one we'll talk about is a peak. All right, a peak is when the economy is running at full steam. There's very few people that are unemployed, and GDP is getting cranked out at a very high rate. All right, income levels are increasing, and sometimes that causes inflation to start. After we are in a peak for a while, at some point we'll start going down in economic output, and that's called a recession. That's when GDP, income, and employment all drop, which means more people are out of work. Wages might actually fall, and GDP slows. All right, the next part of the business cycle is the trough, which is also referred to sometimes as a depression if it lasts a long time. And that's when the output and unemployment bottoms out, waiting for the next phase to begin. And then, of course, the next phase is a recovery/expansion. You can call it either a recovery or an expansion. In a recovery/expansion, the economy starts growing once again and moving away from the bottom that it just experienced at the trough. Employment, production, and income all undergo a period of growth, and overall economic climate is good. And then I have a chart that shows the 4 phases of a business cycle. All right. And then lastly, the one last thing I want to mention is a depression, which is a severe, prolonged downturn in economic activity. In economics, a depression is commonly defined as an extreme recession that lasts 3 or more years or leads to a decline in real gross domestic product of at least 10%. Back in the 2010 financial crisis, many people thought we were in a depression or going into a depression, and it turned out that we actually didn't last for 3 or more years of declining GDP. So we didn't actually go into a depression. They called it the Great Recession because it was a pretty bad recession. All right, so at this point, you have to go and work on completing the Business Cycle Lesson 1 worksheet. All right, if you have any questions, please email me, and I'll get right back to you if you have any problems whatsoever. All right, thank you.